Didn't expect to be making this video this week. Talk about a midweek surprise. The Sentebale Charity Commission report is finally out. And it looks like both parties aren't exactly in the clear. Surprising? Let's discuss. First, I'm going to give you a very quick recap of the sequence of events before we actually look at the report itself or the summary of the report, because we don't actually get access to the Commission's in-depth findings. And while we do that, we're also going to hone in on certain points that call Harry's credibility into question and that point to the possibility that the case may not be over yet. This all started when late last year, the former board of trustees at Sentebale had issues with the way that Dr. Chandauka was attempting to raise funds. She wanted to focus the fundraising efforts in the US, and they were concerned with her alleged mismanagement of funds. According to them, she had spent £500,000 on consultants to find wealthy donors in the US, a claim which Dr. Chandauka denied. According to reports, after she was confronted about this alleged mismanagement, she sued the charity and also filed a complaint with the Charity Commission, which then triggered, or if you believe Harry and the former trustees side, forced them to resign. And then the rest of us in the public were alerted when Prince Harry's PR team, leakers as ever, decided to share with the world what has been going on. And so then that led to Dr. Sophie Chandauka responding first with written statements, and it was a back and forth. And I remember referring to this even in my April video. It was all very childish, all very he said, she said, and it culminated in an interview that was given by Dr. Chandauka to explain her side of the story. A majority of people were actually on Dr. Chandauka's side, especially after we all understood, and I think this was before the interview, that she was the woman who was involved in the whole polo photo call uncomfortable situation where Meghan was trying to choreograph who stood where. Now, we also learned from her in that interview that Harry basically forced her to defend Meghan, a demand which she rejected, claiming that neither she nor Sentebale should be seen as a Sussex mouthpiece. And if you connect all the dots, it seems that that was really the breaking point. In fact, she said in the interview herself that that incident is really when the relationship between her and Prince Harry in particular started to significantly deteriorate. From her interview, I got the impression that she had evidence. In fact, a third party confirmed that Prince Harry did indeed send her a scathing text message that has not been divulged in the public domain, and that I believe the Charity Commission possibly either was not privy to either or couldn't take into consideration. Because as we're going to see, that would be beyond the purview of the Commission. All right, so after conducting interviews and thoroughly reviewing all of the evidence, the Charity Commission found that there were issues surrounding the delegation of certain powers to the chair. It was found to be confusing, convoluted, and a poorly governed process with a lack of clearly defined delegations over time. So I want to stop and say here that this is a Sentebale problem, not a Dr. Chandauka problem. And I also want to say from jump, I'm not taking sides here. Second, the then trustees, so the former trustees, failed to have proper processes and policies in place to investigate internal complaints. More generally, a lack of clear policies contributed to the failure to resolve disputes. And finally, it was not satisfied that public statements made to the media and public criticism made in television interviews were conducted in a way that served the charity's best interests. This is a point that I've personally made, and I think many commentators have likely touched upon as well, which is it really wasn't a good look. It was petty, it was childish, and things should have been kept internally rather than airing dirty laundry. Now, we do have to remember that, as with Megxit and the whole Oprah interview, Prince Harry and his team were the first to involve the press, to involve the public. Dr. Chandauka tried to respond in writing, in the press as well, through the media, before choosing to give that interview. And she did explain that she was being severely attacked and targeted by the Sussex PR machine, which, I think we can all see, also included the Sussex squad. That's why Sentebale have shut down all their comments on their social medias. They've basically locked down. Was it right for Dr. Sophie to give an interview? When you're under pressure and when you're being attacked, I think sometimes, or a lot of the time, we can lose sight and start to perhaps not make the best decisions, because it wasn't a good decision. The only losers in all of this are the beneficiaries of the charity. As the CEO of the Charity Commission said, Sentebale's problems played out in the public eye, enabling a damaging dispute to harm the charity's reputation, risk overshadowing its many achievements, and, most importantly, I think, jeopardizing the charity's ability to deliver for the very beneficiaries it was created to serve. All right, moving on to the claims of bullying and misogyny and harassment and misogynoir. Based on the evidence provided and reviewed by the Commission, it found no evidence of widespread or systemic bullying or harassment, including misogyny or misogyny noir at the charity. However, the Commission has acknowledged the strong perception of ill treatment felt by a number of parties to the dispute and the impact this may have had on them personally. It's interesting. First of all, note the words widespread or systemic. Now, I haven't seen any evidence of bullying, harassment, misogynoir, as Dr. Sophie claims. She says she has that text message, as I mentioned earlier. We haven't seen it. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen, because the words widespread or systemic are explicitly mentioned on purpose. It doesn't mean that there aren't individual cases of bullying or harassment. I'm not saying there was. I'm just trying to illustrate that the language here really matters. More importantly, as Sentebale actually explained on their website, it is not the Commission's responsibility to adjudicate or mediate internal disputes. This would include individual, note the word individual, allegations of bullying, harassment, misogyny, misogynoir, etc. As a result, the Commission has not investigated any individual allegations and therefore has not made any findings in relation to individuals, including Prince Harry. The issues not investigated by the Commission can and may be dealt with through avenues more appropriate than the Commission. It's worth noting that upon checking the status of the civil claim that Dr. Chandauka had filed back in March this year, it's still listed as active. So it hasn't been closed. I think there were some erroneous reports earlier in the year that claimed she has dropped the case. It hasn't been dropped. Whether it's going to continue, I don't know. The last it was active was the 17th, I believe, of April. So it's been a while since any activity has taken place. But I suppose we'll keep an eye out. It's also worth noting, because I want to be fair, that the Commission has acknowledged the strong perception of ill treatment. Now, that doesn't mean that ill treatment actually took place on the part of Prince Harry and the rest of the board, the former board. It's merely acknowledging the perception. So it is subjective. It's not an objective finding. And also of note, I think, is that this ill treatment was felt by a number of parties. So it wasn't just restricted to Dr. Chandauka. Very interesting. Secondly, it found that there was no evidence of any overreach by either Harry or Dr. Chandauka. So neither of them have overstepped their boundaries, but the Commission is critical of the charity's lack of clarity in delegations to the chair, which allowed for misunderstandings to occur. And this failure to clarify delegations and also the failure to have proper processes for internal complaints both amount to mismanagement in the administration of the charity. This does not look like it's a condemnation of Dr. Chandauka. It seems to be, yet again, the policies within Sentebale, even before Dr. Chandauka joined as chair, were defective or inadequate, I should say. Specifically in relation to Harry as patron, or former patron, I should say, The commission expects that in future, the charity should have a clearly defined patron role set out in writing. This tells me that because there wasn't a clearly defined role for the patron, the commission couldn't even decide on whether Harry overreached as patron or not. When there is no framework, when there are no limits or barriers, how do you determine that someone has overstepped their boundaries? And I'm trying not to let my bias against Harry color my opinion here, but it seems as though perhaps his actions did go beyond what would normally be expected of a patron. They're really just a figurehead for the most part. But again, no clear role defined. How do you determine if there was overreach or not? Another thing of note is that there was no mention whatsoever of the financials, specifically in relation to the allegations that were leveled against Dr. Chandauka by the former board with the mismanagement of funds issue. Now, this tells me that perhaps these allegations were baseless only because the report explicitly mentions that the commission did go through various accounts, and for instance, it did identify COVID as a factor, as a cause for much of the financial strain that was experienced by Sentebale. So clearly it did go through the financial reports, presumably also this year's, which still hasn't been filed for the public to review. I've been waiting on it for months, and I did start to find it suspicious that it hasn't been filed yet. Because as much as I was drawn in by Dr. Chandauka's persona, I did always say I reserve judgment because I need to look at the financials of the last 12 months when she was at the helm, to see whether the former trustees had any basis in accusing her of mismanaging funds. We never got to see that. My suspicions started to grow. But perhaps now with the report, we can safely assume or deduce that, especially seeing as Dr. Sophie Chandauka, I keep trying to pick, do I say Dr. Sophie? Do I say Dr. Chandauka? Apparently the title is honorary, by the way. She received an honorary doctorate. Whatever. The woman's free to use the title if she wants. She's still at the helm. And that says to me that she was found to be suitable to carry on in her role, along with her newly appointed trustees. The conclusions arrived at by the commission basically were really centered on: make your policies better, people. Address your issues surrounding your internal dispute resolution avenues, and don't lose sight of what this charity is about. You have to prioritize your mission, which is to best serve your beneficiaries. And mediation here has been recommended. Now, this is interesting to me because Prince Harry says, or at least his sources, because of course, Harry went straight to the media after this finding was published, despite the charity commission saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't take to the media as a matter of, I suppose, let's say, second resort. How about you deal with your issues internally? But this is Prince Harry we're talking about. They went to Oprah and made allegations, explosive allegations that were determined to be lies, which they have backtracked since, instead of dealing with matters in private. So, it's a pattern of behavior par for the course. However, his sources say Harry had personally tried to mediate between Dr. Chandauka and the trustees, and when that was rejected, he even offered to bring up an independent firm of lawyers to help. Now, I can't disprove that, but the strongest hint that this is potentially untrue is the fact that the commission recommended mediation. It made no mention of mediation attempts being ignored or rejected. So unless this was omitted deliberately, it would suggest that perhaps Harry's not exactly being truthful. I mean, he doesn't seem to be the mediation type. Let's face it. Was Oprah meant to be a mediator?
What?
This report, if anything, tells us that Sentebale is a mess, or was a mess. And I refuse to believe that Dr. Chandauka is solely responsible for it being a mess, because clearly the framework, the entire structure of the charity was in disarray before she even joined. And now it's up to her, I suppose, to fix it, because Harry and Princeso and everybody else for that matter are pretty much never coming back. They've made it very clear in public statements released via the press, as usual, that they're incredibly disappointed in this outcome. They really hoped that Dr. Chandauka would be held responsible for the supposed actions that she had taken, and that because she's still on board, they're never going to go anywhere near Sentebale ever again. The former trustees have also released a statement saying that they're disheartened by the way in which the Charity Commission has chosen to ignore key concerns and irrefutable evidence raised with them regarding the leadership and oversight of Sentebale's chair. We remain gravely concerned for the future of the charity and the well-being of the communities we served for 19 years, following the mission set out by Prince Harry and Prince Seiso in honor of their mothers. If you really cared so much about the charity, then why is it in such disarray? That's the first question that comes to my mind. If you really cared about the charity and wanted it to function optimally to achieve its main mission, its objective, one would think after 19 years, it would have been in better condition. While Harry and the former trustees' statements reflect disappointment with the findings, it looks like Sentebale is quite happy with them. Well, maybe happy is not the word, but satisfied with the outcome. On their website, they state that they welcome the conclusion and the findings of the compliance case and are looking forward to implementing them. I want to scroll down to Dr. Sophie Chandauka's statement in particular, because while she does briefly reiterate her complaints, she still goes on to say, despite the recent turbulence, we will always be inspired by the vision of our founders, Prince Harry and Prince Seiso. So while this is not a judgment on her character from me, because I don't know her, it was nice to see her mention that, because in Prince Harry and Prince Seiso's statement, they made it quite clear that any feelings they harbor towards the chair are not exactly of the friendly sort. Is that justified, I suppose, is the question. Because their sources, and I hate referencing sources, because who are you? Who are these sources? Name yourselves. These sources are saying that both the princes are devastated by what has effectively been a hostile takeover. A lot of people have made the very valid point that Harry hadn't even been to Lesotho in years, especially since marrying Meghan. Yes, he's done the whole polo charity matches once a year, I suppose. And yes, you can argue he's merely a patron, a figurehead. But the language used, devastated, for instance, implies that he was very attached to this charity and it meant a lot to him. It's also interesting how he's disappointed with the findings of the commission, even though he's relieved that there was no evidence of widespread systemic bullying, harassment, misogyny, whatever the case was. To me, that seems like cherry picking, because if you have enough confidence in the commission to be proud of the finding that there was no systemic bullying, etc., then why aren't you confident in their finding that Dr. Chandauka is a suitable chair? Knowing everything we know now, this has been going on for a few months now, so that's why I wanted to give you all a refresher. Was it a hostile takeover, or was it a situation where Harry, yet again, just like Megxit, thought that he would throw a tantrum, threatened to resign, and the Queen or Dr. Sophie Chandauka would cave and go, no, don't leave, please, I'll do whatever you want. Because he failed in the first instance with Megxit, which led to a whole PR onslaught, a campaign against the royal family for years after that. And then he failed yet again, if my theory is correct, with Sentebale, leading yet again to a PR onslaught. And you know what? To the people who think Dr. Sophie Chandauka is a bad person and is in fact conducting a hostile takeover, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If she is just as bad as they are, then they've picked the wrong woman to mess with. They've finally been given a taste of their own medicine. I've said this before, even in April. Accusations of racism, bullying, and harassment. You couldn't make this up. Exactly what Meghan and Harry have been accusing not just the royal family, but effectively the world at large for 9 years now, since 2016. And so if that's what it's going to take, if it's going to take another narcissist to bring them down or to expose them on the world stage, if you ask me, so be it. But that's all I have for you today. I'm personally not surprised by the outcome, but honestly, my opinion does not matter. At the end of the day, the commission made its findings, but your opinions do matter to me. So do let me know in the comments what you think. You do know how I love to pick those comments that intrigue me and inspire debate. So don't hesitate to put them down so we can discuss them, hopefully in the podcast next week. All right, I hope I didn't miss anything. I had to come up with this real quick. This was not the planned video for this week. I had an entirely different video, but I guess that's just gonna have to wait. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great weekend. See you next week.